Jon Moxley just shocked the WWE Universe with his jaw-dropping return to RAW. After years away from WWE, Moxley made his presence known in the most explosive way possible, by stepping face-to-face with Solo Sikoa. This confrontation could change everything in the ongoing Bloodline civil war. In this video, we break down the return of Jon Moxley to WWE, the tension-filled moment between him and Solo Sikoa, and what this could mean for the future of RAW and the Bloodline storyline. Expect in-depth analysis, storyline implications, and exclusive reactions from this epic WWE moment. Has the unthinkable just happened on WWE RAW? Has Jon Moxley, once known as Dean Ambrose, the man who walked away from Vince McMahon's empire with no intention of ever coming back, just set foot on WWE soil again? And if so, why now? Why Solo Sikoa? Why this war? Tonight, the WWE Universe finds itself frozen in shock. A name that had become legend, spoken only in AEW circles, spoken only in whispers backstage, was suddenly shouted across the arena like a thunderclap. Moxley is back. But this isn't the same man who once stood beside Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins as part of the Shield. No. This is a colder, angrier, far more dangerous version of the man WWE once called the Lunatic Fringe. And his return couldn't have come at a more chaotic time, because right now, the WWE is unraveling from the inside. Roman Reigns is absent. The bloodline is fractured. Solo Sikoa has declared himself the new tribal chief. Jacob Fatu has brought chaos to SmackDown. Seth Rollins is barely holding Raw together. And somewhere in that storm, Jon Moxley walked in, uninvited, unannounced, and stood eye to eye with the enforcer of this new empire, Solo Sikoa. But let's pause and ask, what does this moment really mean? To understand it, we need to go back, years back, to the moment Jon Moxley left WWE. Not with a bang, but with a quiet, bitter exit. At the time, WWE fans thought they'd seen the last of him. He was tired of the system. Tired of creative handcuffs. Tired of playing a caricature of himself in backstage skits that mocked his legacy. He left not with fire in his fists, but with fire in his heart, a need to destroy the version of himself WWE had created. He walked into AEW and became something else entirely. He became a myth, a warrior, a king of ultraviolence. He bled, he brawled, he rebuilt his soul in barbed wire and steel, and so when he returned, when that music hit, when the camera cut to black and panned back to reveal him, it didn't feel like nostalgia. It felt like war, because this wasn't a reunion. It was a warning. The moment Solo Sikoa turned his back on Roman Reigns and declared himself the true head of the table, something shifted in the balance of WWE power. It wasn't just about family anymore, it was about empire. Solo wasn't just trying to control the bloodline. He was trying to conquer everything Roman built. Raw, SmackDown, even NXT. He was setting fire to the rulebook and daring the world to stop him, and for weeks, no one could, that is, until Moxley showed up. The camera captured it in chilling clarity. Solo in the ring, standing over a fallen opponent, tribal beads glistening with sweat and dominance. And then, silence. The crowd began to murmur. A low hum of disbelief swelled into gasps. Then the lights dimmed. Static hit the screen. The arena went red. And from the smoke, there he was, hood pulled low, eyes locked on fire. Jon Moxley. The reaction was instant. Fans rose to their feet, not in joy, but in shock. Commentary fell silent for a heartbeat. Even Solo Sikoa, a man who stared down Brock Lesnar without blinking, took one step back, because for all Solo's might, all his rage and Samoan pride, he knows the history. He knows Jon Moxley isn't just another challenger. He's not a returning legend looking for one last run. He's a man who burns bridges for warmth. A man who doesn't care about titles or legacies. A man who, once upon a time, bled side by side with Roman Reigns. And now, stands before Roman's greatest enemy. There was no mic. No speech. No challenge. Just silence. Moxley entered the ring, slowly, every step deliberate. Solo didn't flinch, but he didn't move forward either. the crowd could feel it. Something was about to explode, and then, Moxley did something no one expected. He smirked, just a flicker. A glint in his eye. Not of joy, but recognition. He wasn't here to shake hands. He wasn't here to save Roman. He wasn't here to destroy Solo. He was here for something deeper, maybe revenge, maybe redemption. Or maybe, just maybe, to remind the world who really started this war, because before there was Solo, before there was a Bloodline civil war, there was the Shield, and of all three members, Jon Moxley was always the unpredictable one. The one who could walk away and come back, when it suited him. Not for money. Not for power. But for the fight. And tonight, it wasn't Roman Reigns who drew him back. It wasn't Seth Rollins either. It was Solo Sikoa, the man who declared himself king. In a kingdom that Moxley helped build, there are whispers backstage, loud ones. That this return wasn't sanctioned by Triple H. That not even Paul Heyman saw it coming. That this was a calculated ambush, negotiated in silence, delivered with fury. One insider said, Moxley didn't come to join anyone. He came to tear it all down. And now, everything is in question. Is Jon Moxley aligning with Roman Reigns? Is he out to destroy the Bloodline entirely? Or is he simply here to burn everything to the ground, because no one else will? What we do know is this: Solo Sikoa didn't attack. He didn't even speak. He just stared. A war-ready glare met with veteran defiance. Two alpha wolves sizing each other up at the edge of a forest soaked in history, and then Moxley left. And no words. No fists. Just a stare. Just enough to shake the entire foundation of WWE. But make no mistake, this isn't over, because you don't summon a man like Jon Moxley, and then walk away clean. Solo Sikoa may have taken the throne in Roman's absence. But tonight, he learned something brutal. There are ghosts in WWE. Ghosts who remember the wars of old. Ghosts who remember what loyalty meant before it was turned into a slogan. And one of those ghosts just walked into his ring. The Bloodline war is no longer internal. It's no longer brother versus brother, cousin versus cousin. Now, it's spilling into the past. Now, it's summoning warriors who left the battlefield long ago, but never forgot what was taken from them. And Jon Moxley, he's not back for fun. He's not back for legacy. He's back for chaos. And Solo Sikoa may think he's the tribal chief, but to a man like Moxley, there are no kings. Only bodies. Only scars. Only the next fight. So as Raw fades to black, and the whispers become screams, the WWE Universe holds its breath, because Jon Moxley has returned. And he's not here to pick sides. He's here to flip the table. Backstage, chaos reigned. Production crews scrambled to adjust segment timings. Officials whispered into headsets with urgency, trying to determine who had approved Jon Moxley's presence, if anyone had at all. And somewhere, behind a curtain or deep in a shadowed hallway, Paul Heyman was watching. His expression unreadable. But if you looked close enough, you'd see it. Not fear. Not yet. But something close. Recognition, because Paul Heyman knows Moxley better than most. He remembers the early days, when Dean Ambrose arrived like a caged dog with a chip on his shoulder and a storm behind his eyes. He remembers watching the Shield rise from the ashes of NXT to dominate Raw and SmackDown in black vests and burning fury. And more importantly, Heyman remembers the day Moxley walked out, not for a rival company. Not for ego, but because he couldn't breathe in a world built on control. He left everything. The merchandise, the slogans, the machine. And he swore never to return. So what did it take to bring him back? Not a paycheck. Not nostalgia. But war, and that war, this civil war inside the Bloodline, is what drew him out. What few fans realize is that Moxley's relationship to Roman Reigns runs deeper than the cameras ever captured. They weren't just stablemates. They were survivors. Together, they toured over 300 days a year. They bled together in street fights. They held tag titles while sleeping 3 to a hotel room. They built WWE's modern era on their shoulders, shoulders that were often broken, bruised, and left untreated for weeks. And yet now, one of them sits in silence. Roman Reigns, the self-proclaimed head of the table, has not responded. No tweets. No cryptic videos. No statements from the Bloodline, only silence. Is he watching from afar? Is he planning a response? Or is he simply waiting for Moxley to decide where he stands? Because the truth is, Roman and Moxley were never enemies. Not truly. They were brothers who took different roads. And tonight, as Moxley stood in front of Solo Sikoa, it felt like an old shadow returning, not to comfort Roman, but to remind him, there is unfinished business in WWE. But the most telling reaction came not from Roman, nor from Heyman. It came from Seth Rollins. Cameras caught it later, in a backstage segment not originally scheduled to air. Seth, sitting in a quiet hallway, staring at a monitor. When asked about Moxley's return, he didn't speak. He didn't smile. He didn't smirk. He simply closed his eyes, because for Seth, Moxley is a memory, one filled with triumph and betrayal. Their last interaction in WWE wasn't friendly. Moxley had walked away, rejecting the Shield, rejecting what they'd built. Seth had chosen the system. He became the company's golden boy. Moxley became the outlaw. Now, the outlaw is back, and Seth knows exactly what that means. He's not just here to confront Solo. He's not here to play the game. He's here to rewrite the rules. What happens next could tear WWE in two. If Moxley stands with Roman, we may see a reformation unlike anything in modern wrestling, a darker, more dangerous iteration of the Shield, united not by justice, but vengeance. But if he stands against Roman and Solo both, then Raw and SmackDown may not survive the fallout. Because there are few men who fight like Moxley. Fewer still who fight with nothing to lose, and right now, Moxley has nothing to lose. He's not tied to championships. Not burdened by legacy. He's a ghost in combat boots, returned to haunt those who forgot what real war looks like. And Solo, he's never faced anything like this. For all his power, all his bloodline, all his rage, he is still young in this game. He's fought giants, but he's never fought someone who doesn't care if they both bleed out in the ring. Moxley isn't afraid of pain. He welcomes it. That's what makes him so dangerous. Already, speculation is spreading like wildfire. Could this lead to a triple threat at SummerSlam? Could Moxley challenge for the World Heavyweight title? Will Paul Heyman broker a deal to bring him under his control again, or will he try to get him banned before he sets the locker room on fire? No one knows, because Moxley isn't talking, and that's the most terrifying part. He's not here to make speeches. He's not here to post cryptic messages on Twitter. He's not teasing merchandise or launching a podcast. He's just here, moving silently through the backstage halls like a shark under the surface, and no one knows where he'll strike next. The Bloodline is already teetering on collapse. Jacob Fatu has rebelled. Jimmy and Jey Uso are ghosts. Zilla Fatu and Tama Tonga hover like wolves on the outside. Roman Reigns remains absent, injured, or perhaps choosing silence as his final weapon. And now, Moxley has entered the picture. Some call it a return. Others call it an invasion, but one thing is certain, Solo Sikoa just felt the pressure shift. For months, he's ruled SmackDown with brutal authority. He's claimed he doesn't need Roman, doesn't fear Paul Heyman, and doesn't answer to anyone until now, because Jon Moxley doesn't knock. He breaks the door, and now that he's through it, WWE may never be the same again. If you want to understand where this is all going, you have to go back to where it all began, before there was a bloodline, before Solo Sikoa crowned himself the new tribal chief, before Roman Reigns became the head of the table. There was the Shield. 3 men united by chaos, forged in pain and destined to break. Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Jon Moxley were more than just a faction, they were a prophecy. A warning to the entire WWE roster that something dangerous had arrived. When they debuted in 2012, they came through the crowd like predators unleashed, dressed in black, silent and unstoppable. They didn't ask for attention. They took it. Every night, every match, every promo, they tore through the division, leaving broken bodies and stunned audiences behind. But while the crowd cheered for the unity, the real story was unfolding backstage. 3 men with 3 different visions of what the future should look like. Roman wanted to lead. Seth wanted to build. Moxley wanted to burn it all down, and in the end, that's exactly what happened when Seth Rollins drove a steel chair into Moxley's back on that fateful night in 2014. The betrayal sent shockwaves across the wrestling world. But what most didn't see, what only those closest to them understood, was that the seeds of destruction had been there from day one. Because Moxley was never meant to be part of someone else's dynasty, he wasn't made to serve a king. He was made to end them. So now, in 2025, as Solo Sikoa declares himself the new king, the parallels are impossible to ignore. Moxley has returned, just as the WWE begins to fracture again. And the last time he stood inside a company at war, he didn't choose a side. He created his own. That's what should terrify Solo Sikoa the most. Roman Reigns is no stranger to Moxley's wrath. He's felt it before, those fists flying like thunder, the reckless disregard for his own body, the complete and utter obsession with destruction. And yet, Roman also remembers the brotherhood. The late-night conversations. The blood-soaked matches. The way Moxley used to throw himself into war without hesitation if it meant keeping the Shield alive. So where does Roman stand now? That's the question on everyone's mind, because Solo might wear the beads, bark orders, and tear through opponents, but Roman built the table. Roman was the one who took a dying bloodline and turned it into an empire. And the moment Solo claimed the throne for himself, he didn't just challenge Roman's legacy, he awoke something dangerous, and if Roman Reigns does come back, he won't be alone. Sources within WWE are already speculating that Roman knew Moxley's return was coming. That the two may have been in quiet communication for weeks. That Moxley didn't just show up, he was invited, but that's not the whole story either, because Moxley is not a soldier. He doesn't march to anyone's drum, not Roman's, not Seth's, not Heyman's. He may stand beside you. But the second you try to command him, he'll slit your throat. So why did he stare down Solo and walk away? Was it restraint? A message? Or a promise? One thing is certain, Solo felt it. The crowd felt it. WWE felt it. That look wasn't just a confrontation. It was a trigger. The match hasn't even been made. No contract has been signed. No challenge has been issued, but the war has begun and Roman Reigns now finds himself at a crossroads. Either stay in the shadows and allow his empire to be devoured by the monster he created. Or step back into the arena, not as the head of the table, but as a warrior returning to reclaim what was stolen. But if he does, will he stand with Moxley, or against him? That question alone could shape the next 5 years of WWE, because what happens when two kings collide, but one of them is a madman with nothing to lose, and what of Seth Rollins, still injured? Still healing? Still watching, the man who stood at the center of the Shield's rise, and its fall. If Roman and Moxley stand side by side again, where does that leave Seth? Forgotten? Betrayed again, or will he be the one to stop them both? It's no longer just about titles. It's no longer just about brands. Raw and SmackDown are mere battlefields now. This is about legacies, this is about revenge, this is about three men who were once one, and are now splintered across a war that could consume the entire wrestling world. And right in the middle of that storm, stands Solo Sikoa, the enforcer turned monarch, the silent killer turned king. But kings fall, and when they do, it's not to the sound of cheers. It's to the silence that follows after a man like Jon Moxley has walked away, bloodied, broken, but victorious, because Moxley doesn't fight for glory. He fights because it's the only thing that makes sense in a world built on betrayal. And Solo Sikoa, he's about to find out what happens when the ghosts of the past come knocking. Somewhere deep inside the bowels of the arena, long after the cameras had stopped rolling and the crowd had gone quiet, Paul Heyman sat alone. His tie loosened, his hands shaking ever so slightly. The image of Jon Moxley stepping through that smoke was still playing in his mind, looping like a nightmare he never thought would become reality again. He's seen this before. He's felt this before, because Paul Heyman, more than any manager, promoter, or mastermind in WWE history, knows exactly what happens when men like Moxley are left unchecked. He saw it in ECW. He saw it in the early days of the Shield. And now, he's seeing it again. A return. A reawakening. A reckoning, and this time, it isn't just personal. It's biblical. Paul Heyman has always been a man of leverage. A man of strategies, alliances, plans within plans. For years, he stood behind Roman Reigns, not just as an advocate, but as the architect of the Bloodline's most ruthless years. He orchestrated victories, manipulated opponents, and turned family into soldiers. But now? Now the walls are closing in. Solo Sikoa has claimed the kingdom. Roman Reigns is silent, Seth Rollins is sidelined, and into the vacuum steps the one man who cannot be reasoned with, Jon Moxley. Heyman isn't afraid of chaos. But Moxley doesn't bring chaos. He brings collapse. You don't negotiate with a man who doesn't care about power. You can't manipulate someone who doesn't care about winning. You can't control someone who's already walked away from everything, and still came back on his own terms, and that's what terrifies Heyman the most. Because Moxley's return means the game is no longer being played by the same rules. The chessboard has flipped. There are no longer pawns. Only kings. And only one will walk out of this war still breathing. But who's really pulling the strings? That's the question haunting everyone from gorilla position to the top floors of Titan Tower. Some insiders believe Heyman has already begun reaching out to his old contacts, trying to broker new allegiances, rebuild his power in secret. Not for Solo. Not for Roman. But for survival. Others whisper that Seth Rollins, despite his injury, may be making calls of his own. Because if Moxley has returned, and if Roman is still lurking in the shadows, then Seth Rollins cannot afford to wait on the sidelines. This is more than just a comeback. This is the slow resurrection of something darker. Something more violent. Something inevitable. The Shield. But this isn't the Shield of Justice. This isn't the tactical unit that patrolled WWE in 2014. This is the Shield reborn, not to defend, but to destroy. A holy trinity turned unholy. Not united by purpose, but by pain. Moxley, the ghost. Roman, the fallen king. Seth, the scarred prophet. And if they do reunite, not in friendship, but in mutual vengeance, then Solo Sikoa's empire will fall. The bloodline will fracture into dust. And Paul Heyman's legacy will be buried beneath the rubble of the very dynasty he helped build. But that's just one possibility, because there's another. What if they don't reunite? What if Moxley didn't return to stand with Roman, but to punish him? After all, Moxley left. And Roman rose. The tribal chief era was built not just on dominance, but on the absence of the Shield. On the erasure of what came before. Roman reinvented himself as a god. A ruler. A leader who needed no one. But history has a long memory, and Moxley remembers. He remembers being mocked as the weak link. He remembers his final matches in WWE, being fed to Nia Jax, made to look like a joke, creatively suffocated. He remembers the system Roman now rules, and the role he once played in it. So maybe this isn't an alliance, maybe it's a judgment, because Jon Moxley is not here for nostalgia. He's here to remind everyone, especially Roman, that nothing lasts forever. Not power. Not bloodlines. Not legacies built on silence. And if Roman does return, if he dares step back into the light, Moxley will be waiting. Not with an outstretched hand but with a clenched fist. And then there's Seth. What role does the architect play in this storm? He is broken, yes. Fractured. His knee, his pride, and perhaps even his faction all in ruins. But don't mistake weakness for defeat. Seth Rollins is calculating. Vengeful. And the idea that Roman and Moxley could rise again without him, that they could finish the war without the one who started it, burns in his chest like fire. He might be sidelined now, but he's watching. And planning, because if this war is going to end with fire, Seth Rollins wants to be the one who lights the match. So where does that leave us? Solo Sikoa, the self-proclaimed tribal chief, stands at the center of a battlefield he doesn't fully understand. He is powerful. He is brutal. But he is young. And youth in war is dangerous, because youth doesn't see the ghosts until it's too late. He may rule SmackDown now. He may hold the power. But what happens when Roman Reigns returns? What happens when Jon Moxley moves beyond stairs and begins the real hunt? What happens when Seth Rollins picks up the phone and makes the call that will burn it all down? the future of WWE is no longer predictable. It is no longer brand versus brand, it is legend versus legacy, pain versus power, and at the heart of it all, is a name whispered like an omen. Moxley. He doesn't want the throne. He doesn't want the crown. He just wants the last man standing to earn it somewhere deep beneath the spotlight. Under the weight of golden blood, Solo Sikoa stands, silent, unbothered on the surface, but under that stone-cold stare, cracks are beginning to form. The self-anointed tribal chief has ruled SmackDown with an iron fist ever since Roman Reigns disappeared into the shadows. His rise was fast, merciless, and terrifyingly efficient. But even kings built on chaos must face the storm. And Solo's storm is coming from every direction. Inside the ring, he's untouchable. Outside it? His empire is disintegrating. Jacob Fatu, once whispered as the final enforcer of the Bloodline, has gone rogue. Zilla Fatu, the youngest of the feared Samoan lineage, walks beside him, not under the Bloodline banner, but as a war dog unleashed. Jimmy Uso is missing. Jey Uso is watching from Raw. And now, Jon Moxley has reappeared. This isn't just a Bloodline civil war anymore, it's a reckoning. Solo Sikoa made one fatal mistake in his pursuit of dominance. He believed fear was enough, but fear doesn't hold families together. Fear doesn't inspire loyalty. And fear doesn't silence the ghosts of betrayal echoing through WWE, the same ghosts that Moxley brings with him. And now, Paul Heyman, once the loyal wiseman to Roman Reigns, has no throne left to serve. He walks backstage like a man cursed, caught between two fires. On one side, Solo Sikoa, cold and calculating, ruling with brutality. On the other, the return of a former soldier, now a war-torn general in Moxley, who has no allegiance to anyone. Heyman once managed the Shield. He once served the Bloodline, but now, the only thing Heyman can do is survive. Jacob Fatu knows it. He sees the fear in Heyman's eyes, the cracks in Solo's authority, and the vultures circling overhead. And Jacob has made it clear, he's not waiting for Roman. He's not bowing to Solo. He's carving his own kingdom out of the ashes of this war, and if Moxley is fire, then Jacob is the wind feeding it. Their paths haven't crossed, yet. But the tension is undeniable. Two forces. One driven by madness. The other by legacy. When they collide, it won't be for pride. It will be for dominance. And what of Roman Reigns? His absence has grown louder than any promo. Every week he doesn't appear, the whispers grow stronger. Is he watching? Is he planning? Or has he already given up the table he once claimed to sit at? Because when Moxley walked back into WWE, the balance shifted. Roman once called himself the needle mover, but Jon Moxley moved the whole damn arena, and now the unthinkable might happen. What if all three men, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Jon Moxley, stand under the same roof again? The Shield, broken for years, has existed in fragments. Seth, the visionary. Roman, the ruler.